Hey guys, welcome back to Phil Talk. Just so you know, this is a long conversation, so I would advise you check out those chapters I created in the description so you can skip right to where you want to be, what you're interested in. But y'all enjoy.
Danny, I'm just curious to understand, if you don't mind, to just can you just walk us through your journey from Protestant to atheist? What was the motivation? Have you done, for example, some research? Have you uh, is it because of people, because of scripture? Yani, what were the motivations for you to take the decision to switch from Protestant to atheist, if I may ask.
Yeah, I mean, there are probably a lot of reasons, both I would say rational and not rational. There was a point in my life where I stopped, attending church, and I made new friends, and that probably had a lot to do with my deconversion. But as far as philosophical issues, I find it hard to grasp conceptually the God, especially certain the certain conceptions that are related to classical theism and um, it's hard to understand what a divine property is, just to differentiate it from very powerful beings like you would see in the Marvel universe. Um,
That's in, yeah, that's interesting to me because I'm really interested in this topic as I'm studying this to understand what is the motivation of people to leave religions and go in the atheist direction. So can you be more specific, please? Which divine nature that you didn't find it matching your logic, or it's not rational to you? What exactly? Can you give us some examples, specific examples?
yeah, I think like properties like omniscience and omnipotence and fallibility are hard to grasp, and they're especially hard to grasp when you factor in evils. Um, and I think that the notion of disembodied minds, basically minds without bodies, present strong epistemological problems. Because I think one of the ways that I come to know other minds is I make inferences of behavior and their predictions that I can make about my mental states and what behaviors there might be from other minds. So disembodied minds are going to pose epistemological problems, but
Nobody talks about disembodied minds. I mean, what is your purpose here? You trying to believe in God again, or you just want to waste people's time talking about disembodied whatevers?
yeah, I don't think that's a true dichotomy. So
So you talk like this in order to waste people's time, right? Or are you trying to find your faith again? I mean, what is the purpose of your being here? Talking about the hard problem of consciousness. What about the easy problem of consciousness?
well, there is an easy problem of consciousness. Do you want? I don't know if you wanted to know about that. That more has to do with like deliberation, processing power of the mind, that kind of stuff.
Well, we already know that the mind processes information so that it can solve and avoid problems. So, what is your point? You
What
just talk
What's
using,
the point of
these long words that, people don't get. So you can, well, I mean, what is your point?
what are you asking? Why I'm here?
Yeah, I'm asking you why you're here.
Just to have fun, probably.
Yeah,
It's
well, we can have
entertaining.
fun with you, right? Because, you're basically an atheist, and atheists are nihilists, and you just like, well, making everybody like you. Like that. Maybe you're an anti-natalist.
I'm not so sure what you said, but I'm not a nihilist and I'm not an antinatalist. So,
So what moral principles do you have?
Oh boy.
well, I'm a moral particularist, so I don't really
What does
think
that mean?
it means I reject moral principles. I think there might be
You
moral
so
truth.
you are a nihilist. A nihilist is somebody who's proud that he has no moral principles.
No, that's not what nihilism is. Nihilism has to do with the rejection of all moral facts, but there's a distinction between moral facts and moral principles.
What's a moral fact?
So any fact about what you should or shouldn't do.
So, so you don't believe in any rules, and
No, I
so
didn't say that.
what
If
is
you're
the
using
point? What is the point of law then?
what is the point of what?
Law is about what you should and shouldn't do, or else you will be
Oh, I don't
punished.
think so. There are unjust laws, for instance, and in some cases you should go against the law. So,
Okay, so do you have any political affiliations?
I'm sympathetic to Marxism, but I don't label myself as a Marxist.
So you don't believe in anything in particular, but you still call yourself a moral particularist.
Yeah, it just means that the way that you come to moral knowledge depends on the context of your situation rather than a set of principles that you extend to the context.
What do you mean by moral knowledge?
Well, like knowledge about what you should or shouldn't do.
Right, but you're saying there's no right or wrong, so
I never said that.
you contradict yourself.
I never said that. There's a difference between moral principles and moral facts, like I said earlier.
What is the difference?
Well, moral principles are exceptionalist laws about what you should or shouldn't do. Moral facts are just facts about what you should or shouldn't do. Those might vary depending on the
Well, why
context.
don't you give examples of both?
Yeah. So, let's say I think that lying to my parents about stealing from the cookie jar, that might be immoral, but lying to the Nazis that they're Jews underneath my floorboards is not immoral. So there's in one case I should lie, the other case I shouldn't lie. I'm not contradicting myself. I don't hold to a moral principle. It depends on the context that you're in. So that's what a particular
Okay, there are exceptions to every rule. I'll admit
It
that.
seems like you agree with me about moral particularism is. That's exactly what moral particularists don't accept.
No. Everybody knows there are exceptions to every
Not
rule.
Kant. No, they're historically philosophers have tried to uphold moral principles like Kant and Mill and others, right? Like the utilitarian principle, the NADP, the
Well,
non-aggression.
they're wrong, aren't they? I mean, Western philosophy is just rubbish, most of it.
Well, I might agree with you there, Claire.
A God-sized hole, and they've got nowhere.
Yeah, I agree that a lot of Western
Are
philosophies.
you a philosophy graduate by any chance?
Yeah, well, I'm a graduate student. I'm a student of philosophy, so.
Right. So what is the area of your master's? Is it?
Yeah, it's my master's. My focus now. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm just basically a philosophy student for fun. It's not for a career or anything. But I focus on stuff like certain aspects of metaphysics, like free will, philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, mostly.
So what have you to tell us about philosophy of religion?
Don't waste your time with it if you're not interested. That's something that I believe.
Okay, but people who believe in religion obviously are interested in it. Are you telling them not to be interested in their religion?
Not everybody that's religious is interested in philosophy of religion.
But
that's very
we
true.
all live under governments, and we all are subject to its laws, and we obviously want the best moral system so we don't suffer injustice, and we want to enjoy good government.
Okay.
And,
so, sorry, what was that a reply to?
well, you were talking about people who aren't interested in religion.
No. There are people that love religion and interested in theology, but are not interested in philosophy of religion.
I know, not everybody, has time to talk about
right.
words.
And I'm saying that
words. I mean, we're not
one of
all
these one thing
graduates.
You asked me what I could share with you. I'm just saying that philosophy it's overrated to the extent that if you're not interested, you don't need to really go into it.
Yeah, but we know that you're a philosophy. You're doing a master's in philosophy, so you're obviously interested. But you're just playing around. You're not serious about it.
Well, I don't know. I'm very serious about having fun with
you're playing around and your nihilism to as far as you can. You're a kind of moral vandal, aren't you?
Moral vandal, and I don't think particular. I think there are some moral particulars that believe that there are moral facts that are true above psychologies. I mean, so
you're using a lot of words, and you're really
I think
not,
you've been talking
making
as
much
much as me.
sense. Well, I guess my purpose here is to expose you for the nonsense that you speak.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well,
You
you
feel like
haven't
you've
made a
succeeded?
single point other than to deny that you're a moral nihilist when you clearly are a
I
nihilist
don't think
and a
I ever
vandal.
said that I don't think I ever said I was a moral nihilist.
I know, but you are, because you have no moral principles. You believe in nothing, and you want to tell everybody to be like you. And what better place to come than to, you know, Muslims?
Yeah, I
You
don't
want
think
to
I
prove
told
that
anyone.
well, they can't prove you wrong, but then you don't believe in anything. So it's like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
Yeah, but I believe in you.
You believe that I exist and that I oppose your moral nihilism.
Well, I don't know what you mean by moral nihilism anymore, but
Well, the fact that you have no principles and you go around saying you have nothing that you believe in, and you want to go around casting
I just said I
doubt
believe in
and
you.
no, you don't. Well, obviously we are talking, so you have to respond to what I say.
Right, so I
But
believe in
you
something.
are a moral nihilist, and you are proud of it, and somehow your society allows you to, well, spend your time studying nothing and gives
That
you
might be
time
true. That might
spreading
be
your
true.
nothingness for no particular reason.
Well, I do it for reasons, but I
It's
mean,
Yeah,
fun.
to have fun. You said so yourself.
yeah, I like it, and it's enjoyable to me. I wouldn't say you should study it if
You
you're not
think
How
you're
is that
running
any
drinks
different than
around these
Nazism?
Muslims who give you their time and energy while you joke about the hard and easy question of consciousness.
Well, to be
But if you
fair, to be
believe
fair,
in
to be
God,
fair, to be fair,
you would think
excuse
that
me,
a God
one
would say
second, Claire,
something.
one second, Claire. To be fair, I was asked about those things. I didn't bring them up, but go ahead.
Oh, why did you come here?
Well, he didn't really come in as a moral vandal. You know, he came in just in conversation, and we did ask questions of him.
I'm fine with the
Yeah.
moral vandal label.
I think that's
I'll take the label. That sounds awesome.
Sister Claire, he just came in and we were asking him problem because we know he has a background in philosophy and we're just a layman and we just learned a few things from him and we try to give him few of the goods we have, and that's what it was all about.
Yeah, but I mean, I know these
Don't worry, Claire.
Western
I put a warning
academics
label
and
on my
philosophy.
tag.
They just talk rubbish the whole time.
But
They waste
Claire,
their
don't
time.
worry. I put a label. I came with a warning label. You see on my profile, moral
Yes.
vandal beware.
Well, I'm glad I kind of rechristened you,
Beware.
Danny boy.
Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's cute. Moral vandal, beware. That's
Okay,
cute.
so that's for Claire, just in case anybody was disillusioned with,
So what would you do if you stopped having fun?
Oh, I'd be pretty depressed.
But what would
I
you
would need a law,
do?
right, or something.
A law.
There's probably a lot of meaning in religious belief, including Islam. So maybe I'd take, if it weren't for philosophy, I think theology would be kind of fun.
But for you, if you didn't have fun to motivate you for doing anything, what would you do? What would you?
Oh no! Don't, just to be clear, I do philosophy for fun. There are other things I do not for fun. Like I don't wipe my ass for fun.
Mr. Moral Vandal, have you looked into Islamic philosophers in history?
No, I haven't. Other than that, Al-Ghazali. Am I saying that right or wrong? Ghazali, sorry. And I didn't even look into him. I just kind of briefly read a wiki page. But to be honest, and then of course there are versions of the cosmological argument that are, related to Islamic philosophy and natural theology and the
contingency.
But I mean, I really haven't. I'm quite ignorant. So of a lot of the philosophy that outside of the West.
Well, you might want to take a delve because there's been a lot of sharing in time. I mean, I find out that Christian philosophers and some other philosophers have.
Danny, I thought you came here. You have a background in Islamic philosophy, understanding that. Did I not say to you you found home in Arabia, or did I say Islam really accommodated it, and
Sure.
we gave it back to the West? And why?
Some of the people I see in debates are using a lot of Western jargon and Western philosophy to do really well in debate. So I am interested in that. And yeah, I already said that there are probably a lot of Muslims that think really deeply about how the world is, how it's made, under their view, and think deeply about their theology. I respect that. Lot of
It's not only that they think that it's an individual who wants to think. It's prescribed for us to do that. It's commanded us in the Quran to do that. We are encouraged to do that.
It's
It's
cool,
not
man.
that,
Yeah,
pound. You'll find verses where they say, reflect, ponder, look at the heaven and earth, look at where have you created yourself, where you were created. I think you have no idea how rich is the Muslim and Arabian Peninsula had on human progress on thoughts and understandings, our surroundings and language and everything.
yeah. I bet there was a big influence from Islam at some point. I mean, I don't know too much about it. It seems like you know a lot more about it, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but if that's the case, then cool.
The reason is we are hanging our salvation to that, and I will highly encourage you to reflect on, read the Quran, understand it, look at it, and ponder. Look at the Hadith, the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think you will find quite an amazing throb of riches in Islam for a person who uses intellect to think and to ponder and to use it as a tool.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for me to read something on Islamic philosophy.
What is your email? Put it in the private chat, and we'll send you stuff.
Oh God, I have enough to read. But I mean, I'll put my email anyways. But I'm probably not going to get to it for a while.
What are you currently reading?
No, but
I'm reading...
Danny,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this takes me to my initial question to you. Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So, you said one of the biggest motivations for you to switch or to convert from Protestant to atheist was the idea of mind without body. So have you tried to explore any other religion before taking the big decision of not believing in God?
No, I went from,
because it's a big decision, isn't it?
Well, I guess so. With respect to like my family and friends, yeah. But honestly, I don't really dwell on the deconversion very much. So.
But don't you think it's worth to just explore other ideas about God, about creation, about death, about all these kind of things, just to make sure that you didn't take the wrong decision?
No, I don't think I made the wrong decision, but yeah, I think it would be like I would be willing to eventually read something on Islamic philosophy and Islamic theology. I think theology in general is interesting to me, whether it's true or false. So yeah, I think it might be worth looking into.
I missed your email because my browser crashed.
Okay, let me put it again.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, because simply, I think you might find what you missed in Christianity in other religion.
Yeah, I think that my problems with Christianity started with problems with theism. So, but I do think that Christianity has probably a little bit more mumbo jumbo. Like, I can't make sense of the Trinity or the Incarnation. I think that. So, like, if I was forced to go back,
join the club.
If I was
all of us, yeah.
Yeah, if I was forced to go back to a religious belief, I would have to be, some kind of Unitarian or be a Muslim or something like that. I don't think any of that. Like a man being God, I think there's I don't even know what that means.
So you would think of God that he can't be a man, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I would have to ask what they meant when they say Jesus is God. It's never made sense to me.
Okay, this is the same Islamic concept, yeah.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I was just saying this is the same. This is exactly the Islamic concept an understanding of God that that a man cannot be a God.
Yeah, I would agree with y'all. I think that y'all got that one right. So
But do you think there is a God or not?
no, I don't believe in God.
Then who do you think created us, created you, created all this universe?
All the universe. Well, I really don't know what happened with that. Oh, go ahead.
Akh Muhammad, brother Khalil holds that reign for us usually. Danny raised the issue concerning the problem of evil. Oh, did you when we were speaking in the beginning? You said about one of the reason is the problem of was it the problem of evil?
Yeah, what the divine properties are, the nature of the divine properties, the problem of evil, and then there's epistemic problems with disembodied minds.
I think brother Khalil has a quite a hold of this subject and better than me and the rest, and Sister Claire too may give you some insight on
Who?
because Sister Claire and
He's talking about
Khalil-
me.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I've spoken with Danny multiple times before, kind of on these subjects, and I think most of the time what we were talking about, like Kalam or something like that.
Yeah, I think.
And what about the problem of evil, Khalil? How does it?
Well, I think the problem of evil falls into like apparently, like generally there's like two horns, and it depends on which horn you fall into, and basically either way, whether you fall into the first horn or the second horn, there's problems that Danny would bring up within that. So Danny, if you want to, you can present like whatever argument you have is for the problem of evil, and then we can just respond to it.
Yeah, there are a lot of versions of the argument, and there are versions of certain conceptions of God that are not susceptible to the problem. So the problem, I'll just give you a problem of evil. I guess if you first believe that God has the power to actualize any logical state of affairs or make any logical proposition true, if you think he has that property, if you think that God knows all true propositions, so there's his omniscience, and if you think that God doesn't make mistakes, in other words, God, when he actualizes or brings about an event, he didn't make a mistake. He ought to have done that, and he did it. And if you also think that there are events, if everything that happens somehow depends on God, because without God there would be no events, there would be no creation. And if you believe nonetheless that some events that have occurred ought to have not happened, that's what I understand as evil, then I think you can get a contradiction from those like 5 or 6 premises. And the idea is that they're going to be all events are actualized by God. God actualizes events that are only ones that he should actualize, or the events that God actualizes are the only kind of events that should be actualized, but nonetheless they're events that shouldn't be actualized. There's evil in the world, and God is aware, of course, of all true propositions, including all the events that he actualizes. And so there you get a contradiction.
So what would you say the contradiction would be? If I was to grant all those preliminary questions, the omniscience, and he only actualizes logical, he knows all logical propositions, he actualizes everything that ought and must be actualized. What would contradiction would derive from that?
Yeah, so you would get that there are some events, all events ought happen, and yet there are some events that ought not to have happened. All things considered, that would be the contradiction.
So what if I was to say all events ought happen?
Well, then that means that you would think that there are no events that ought not happen.
No, I would just say the events that ought not happen are the events that haven't and won't happen.
Right. So I'm just saying, if you believe that all events ought to have happened, or all events that occur or will occur or are occurring ought to happen, then you're committed to thinking that there are no events that ought not to have happened.
No events that are actualized that ought not happen.
Whether that be in the whatever tense or whatever time index. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're not just talking about possible world theories. You're specifically talking about
The
ontology.
actual world. Yeah, I'm talking about the actual world.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I would just state that all events ought happen.
Yeah, that seems like you're just rejecting evil in the sense that if evil is construed as an event that ought not to have happened, all things considered.
Say that one more time. I'm trying to process that.
Yeah, an evil event is an event in which all things considered ought not to have happened. If you think that all events ought to have happened, then you're just for denying evil in that sense.
I'm denying evil if I say
That all events ought to have happened, all things considered.
so. It may seem post hoc, but the reason why I say all events ought happen, basing off of our idea in Islam, is that we existed in the realm of souls prior to us coming down as human beings, and we chose to take this test to where we were forewarned about hardships and trials and tribulations and whatnot. So it's almost like let me bring an example. If you're playing a video game, you're going to come across get through a certain amount of levels. There's a guy that's attacking you. You gotta get past him, past the next guy to get to the first boss, so on and so forth. So in the game, even though things might be happening to you that you would think ought not happen, there was a choice that was made knowing that these things would happen, and there's a purpose for these things happening, whether our fallible minds can perceive why they're happening, because we have limited knowledge. So I would just say that all actions or all actualizations of all state of affairs ought happen, and we as human beings perceive things that are not palatable to us as we would perceive those actualizations as evil. But I don't think that directly contradicts the idea that they ought happen. I think we might have a distinction in how we define evil.
Yeah, I'd just take evil to be if something happens, if it's evil, it ought not happen, all things considered.
In Islam, if I could, Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that God does create things that he hates, but he does this only for the sake of a wise purpose that he loves. So evil is not just something that is absolutely evil. There's a greater good behind every evil and every suffering in the Islamic
That
paradigm.
just means that it ought, whatever you're saying is conducive to a greater good or greater plan ought to happen for the sake of that plan, which means that it's not going to be evil in the sense that it ought not to have happened, all things considered.
Correct. Yeah. So I would just define evil as things that we perceive as non-palatable.
Yeah, but do you think that God thinks that there's anything evil?
Does God think that there's anything evil? Yeah, God could definitely think that some of the choices that we make are evil, even though
Yeah.
God does not actualize our choices. We actualize our choices.
Well, there still would be some counterfactual. If God did not exist, then we couldn't make choices. So there is a kind of dependent on. We are dependent. Our choices, whether they're libertarian or not, free choices, do depend on God actualizing them or bringing them about. Perhaps not causally, as you would want to say, but there's still a counterfactual there. And there's an awareness of God. I mean, God knows that counterfactual prior to creation. But to your other points, yeah, it seems like if you're defining evil in terms of what's not palatable to humans, then when you say that God thinks that certain choices are evil, then that has to be an equivocation on evil.
Has to be an equivocation on evil. How so?
Right, because it can't mean when we say, if you were to say that God finds your choice evil, he's not saying God that he finds your choice not palatable to humans. He's saying the idea is that when God finds your choice evil, he's thinking to himself that it ought not happen, given all considerations.
Yeah, I don't think I could line up with that, because with him having omniscience and knowledge, he would know. He created us knowing the choices that we were going to make, and he still actualized the universe anyways. So
Okay,
I
but I think that what we were just talking about is whether there was an equivocation, and I think I did point out that there is an equivocation if you're saying that in one sense evil is just what's not palatable to humans, but then there's this other sense of evil where God finds certain events evil, like when a rapist rapes. He's going to find that evil presumably in some cases, and that's not going to mean something like, oh, God finds that unpalatable to humans.
So you would say there has to be a distinction between what humans think is evil and what God thinks is evil.
Exactly, and the more interesting sense of the problem of evil, our sense of what's palatable to us, what's not, doesn't matter. It's the idea is that the problem of evil, at least the logical problem of evil, is more of an internal critique. It's say, hey, if God thinks that there are events that ought not happen, all things considered, then given his other properties, we can draw a contradiction.
Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah's student, Ibn al-Qayyim, goes on to state that evil can be considered as one, privation, principally as ignorance and injustice; 2, anything dissociated from the Holy Lord; 3, the perpetration of what the Holy Lord has prohibited; or 4, the abandonment of what he has commanded. Ibn al-Qayyim then begins to reconcile the existence of evil by stating, although the existence of a particular good may be better than its existence in all situations may result in foregoing something that is more beloved to God. Likewise, although the non-existence of something evil may be preferable to its existence in one aspect, it may be that its existence is a means or a cause that leads indirectly to something more beloved to him.
Yeah, and I think I went over that already. The idea is that if evil is counting as something that brings about the greater good, then it just seems like that event ought to have happened, all things considered. And that's not what is meant by evil when God thinks to himself that, well, that should not happen. You should have not sinned or whatever.
So I'm trying to understand, like, so the if we were to say that there's just a distinction between what we think is evil and what God thinks is evil, so we would think human beings think that evil is anything that's non-palatable to us.
Yeah, that's not even what I think evil is, though.
Yeah.
Even independently of theism, because there are things that I might really find I hate that word, that I'd find distasteful, but I think I should do, like eat broccoli. I find broccoli very distasteful, but I think there are cases where I should eat it. So I think that I want to treat the terms good and evil normatively, in terms of oughts, not in terms of like more like thicker terms or descriptive terms like or dispositions of like being drawn to or being drawn away, like in the case of palatable or whatnot. But
Sure. So if you what you're basically asking for is a different, more broad definition of what evil is, rather than me just saying it's not palatable. You want like an is
well,
ought
actually, I provided that for you, and there was just a question of whether you accepted it or not. I just take if something's evil, if an evil event occurred, I'm just saying that all things considered, it ought not to have happened. So if I say that, I don't know, if someone was being bigoted towards Muslims, I would say that all things considered, that should have not happened, and that's what I mean by evil.
Mm-hmm. But if there was some type of greater good that came out of that, then you would say that should have happened. And that
right, all things considered, it ought to have happened. So suppose I find out that being bigoted towards Muslims increases, I don't know, the number of Muslim converts, which is something that, it's not true. Maybe it's not true, but I'm just stipulating. But let's say you thought that, oh, well, that's worth it. It's worth going through the bigotry so long as we have more converts in Islam. Well, then, all things considered, it was good. It ought to have happened.
So you're saying that the contradiction, because I'm just trying to tie down the contradiction. You're saying that there's a state of affairs to where an actualization ought not happen, but also at the same time it ought happen.
Right, and the idea that if you believe that God actualizes all events and he doesn't make mistakes, that implies that all events ought to have occurred, or should be occurring, or will occur. Well, the ones that will occur should happen, all things considered. But nonetheless, there's evil, which means that there are events that ought not to have occurred, and there you get the contradiction.
Sure. So if I was to say I don't think that God actualizes all events, that all events sometimes events that ought not happen are derived from humans and not God.
Yeah, that's a
Even
move to make, but then you're dropping the conditional that, or the counterfactual, if God did not exist, then this evil event would still have occurred. But I don't think you're dropping.
but I wouldn't even be able to accept even the hypothetical scenario that God does not exist, because I mean we would have to go into like contingency and things like that to show that there must be a necessary being.
Okay, so the idea is that then, if you're considering, I could still make the argument. Then that's fine. Let's take that God is logically necessary, for sake of argument.
Mhm.
Still, the idea is that, if you're accepting some mode of the contingency argument, some kind of principle of sufficient reason, all our actions are still going to be explained by a necessary being. So that implies that there's a dependence, right, on those evil actions on God.
Yeah, in indirect depend, like in maybe like in some type of indirect dependency.
Yeah. So that means that these events, whether directly or indirectly, depend on God in a way where if God chose differently, they may have not happened, right? So we don't have to talk about in terms of, oh, if God did not exist, we wouldn't make evil choices. We could just talk about in terms of God made different choices, like choices that didn't bring about the solar system or the universe. Then it would still be true that I would have not, that I would have not made those choices. But if you're so that's what but if you're dropping the clause that, well, there's some events that are brought about independently of God, then you just have to let go to that counterfactual. It could be the case that God intended to not create the universe, yet I'm still making even choices, and that seems unacceptable.
Sure. So if I was to argue that God actualizes all states of affairs that ought happen, and then within those state of affairs, because he actualized, for example, the existence of human beings, that we can make choices that ought not happen,
Ought not
then I
happen, all
don't.
things considered.
Even if I was to say not all things considered, there are actions that ought not happen.
But it's
If
very
they're
important that you say, all things considered, because here we're granting the coherency of God having competing desires. But if God has uh, competing desires, I think there's going to be a myriad of problems. But one of the but what it does save you from is that there might be a sense in which it ought not happen, but it should happen given God's stronger desire. And that's to say, all things considered ought happen, even though there's some reason for him not to do it or not to actualize it. And it's going to
like
be
I'm trying to tie it to something in the Quran, like for example, like it says that the disbelievers are deaf, dumb, and blind, and that if they truly do internally within themselves as a human being want to go down a path of disbelief, that that Allah will actually push them down that path into disbelief. And I think we can all agree, and I think Allah would say also that this thing is something that ought not happen, but due to the fact all things considered, um, He's going to push them down that path because that's what they want.
yeah. So all things considered, it ought to have happened then.
Why
I
can't we
don't.
accept that it happened? I mean,
I
because there is a verse that says God created evil, isn't there, in Isaiah 45:7?
yeah. Well, that's
So,
biblical though.
but it still makes sense. I mean, even as a Muslim, because I think it was Leibniz who said in his character of Dr. Pangloss in Candide that we live in the best of all possible worlds, and therefore we have to accept that whatever happens, God intended, and the only way to make sense of it is that all suffering is punishment for sin. And therefore, we are to think that if we want to stop suffering, then we have to stop sinning. And we just go through the list of the no-hide laws that our governments do not follow. And then we
Yeah, I
stop
would.
suffering.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just say that evil is simply the transgressing against what the morals of what the Creator has given us.
Standard.
Yeah, if you go against these standards, you are doing evil and you are bringing evil into the world. But simply just because God knows that you're gonna do that, or God is allowing you to do that, it doesn't mean anything. You're just practicing your choices, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean, we can sort of think, wow, God has created a world in which the sin is its own punishment. We sin and we get punished. Well, not immediately, but at some time later.
it's karma, yeah. It's karma. Like even if you, like, let's say you steal something, you go to jail. That's your consequence. That's like God punishing you in this life for your consequence. Let's say you kill some people and you get away with it, right? And you don't go to jail or anything. You're still not gonna get away with it because there's still justice in the afterlife for you, and you're gonna be punished for that. So there's no escape when it comes to justice and evil, because evil will always be equated with justice. So in the end, it's gonna cancel out with no evil. So
Yeah, and if people believed in the afterlife, well, firstly, it would make them happier and more likely to obey God's laws for longer. And, and once the laws of God are in place, then more people will follow them because, people basically follow what they think is powerful and works and, what their government forces them to do anyway.
and it would justify evil, because if you balance things out, if each evil act has a consequence that brings justice into it, it pretty much demolishes the evil act, since there is
Yeah.
justice that comes with it. So it's gonna
Yes,
cancel out. You get me?
Yeah, and we don't know at the time whether this thing that happened to us that we love will result in evil, or this thing that we hate will result
Yeah.
in good. I mean, they say there's a silver lining in every cloud, and
That's in the Quran,
we don't
actually. That
know.
there's a verse in the Quran that says that عَسَى تَكْرَهُ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It says you might hate something, but it could be good for you. And you
Yes,
might like something that could be bad for you.
yes, and this applies to wives as well. I mean,
Sure.
there's a verse that says your children and your wives can be enemies to you, but you still have to forgive them.
Yeah, it's very complex when it comes to our choices and justice. But yeah.
Danny, I wanted to point out concerning when you speak about the problem of evil, you do usually think of free will, because can we say not God that has about free will? We can do what we can do what we want, but we will at the end pay the ultimate price for it.
Oh, I mean, I've considered the free will theodicy in the context of the problem of evil. I can see why it would be persuasive, but I think it ultimately fails. A couple things. There are a couple of reasons why. Presumably, well, it depends on your conception of God once again, but the idea is that suppose you take a libertarian interpretation of free will, so every action you make, you could have done differently. And let's say God wants morally significant free will, which is the kind of free will where when you make a moral choice, if you had done differently, then you would have been sinning or doing something wrong. Suppose we're just talking about those kinds of free actions. There's still going to be, given the libertarian conception of free will, a world where a world where everyone chooses to do the good, even though they could have done differently. Right? That's just kind of entailed by a libertarian model of free will. So then there's going to be, if there's a logically possible world in which everyone does the good, but nonetheless they could have done differently, then God's omnipotence entails that it was possible for him to actualize that world over the world in which we did the wrong, right? And so I don't really think that that's going to be a very good response then. Consequently, also, keep in mind that God has free will, and he has the kind of free will where if he does the right action, he could have not done differently. He could have not done the wrong action, rather. So it doesn't seem like free will entails the possibility of doing evil. And if you're just interested in morally significant free will, then God wouldn't have that. So I think those are some preliminary thoughts.
So you're saying because go ahead.
Go on, brother. Jazakallah.
So you're saying because God wants specifically good acts or good morality to occur, but at the same time we do evil and he's letting it happen and take place, that like contradicts the idea. I don't understand.
Well, there's a lot here. So
Khalil, I'll give you a second. Khalil, do you understand his argument or no?
did I understand what you just said?
No, I'm asking Khalil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I understand the basis of the argument, but I also see what your guys' objections to that basis was. So I'm just kind of just listening to where he would go with it from there.
Yeah, so if I wasn't wrong, I kind of forgot what the argument was, but that there is evil taking place, but there should be good. But then
Are
I
you
explained it
familiar?
off.
Maybe I can walk you through it, and unless you
Sure,
want to
sure,
finish
sure.
your thought.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so we're bracketing compatible as free will. So we're not talking about the free actions that are determined by the antecedent conditions or the external conditions to your.
Danny, 1 minute? Can I interject? Can you please don't use a lot of jargons for us? We a lot of us, yeah, because we get kind of lost in the jargons of philosophy. Please try to make it for a layman like me.
I'll
How
try to
about
scale it back. I'm sorry.
How about this?
I have the same request. I have the same request also, and I would suggest if you walk us through a simple example, Danny, for the problem of evil, and from this example, take us to your conclusion of existing of God or not. I think this will be
of God.
Make it.
Well, I can go back to the problem of evil, but I think they wanted to talk about free will and how it relates to evil. And so maybe we can do that and then go back to the problem of evil if you want, Mohammed. Also, I don't mind being interrupted. So if you need to interrupt me for any reason, that's fine. So there are two kinds of free will, right? There's the kind of, some people think that free will is the kind of thing where when you freely act, nothing caused it outside of yourself. That the ultimate cause of your action is just simply you, period. But then there's another kind of free will where free will is just defined in terms of being able to succeed in your will or being able to act the way you want. And that's compatible with things causing you to will. So like people call that determinism, right? So we're going to forget about determinism right now. We're just going to look at the first kind of free will. In the first kind of free will, when you act in a certain kind of way, especially in the case of moral situations, let's say you're deliberating between stealing and giving to charity or something like that. If you choose to give to charity, if that's freely acted, usually there are two conditions under this kind of free will. Number one, that you're the ultimate cause or the first cause of your action, and number two, that you could have done differently. That if you chose to give to charity rather than steal from charity, then when you decided you could have actually stolen rather than give. So that's the kind of free will that is usually talked about in the cases of explaining why there might be evil in the world given that kind of God. Okay, are we clear so far? Does anything I need to elaborate on? We good? Okay. So now the thing is that, okay, so if every action you take that was sinful was freely willed under the conception that I just drew, you could have done differently. So think about the last time you sinned. Okay, under this conception of free, if you freely sinned, you could have not sinned. Now, what's entailed by that is that there's some other hypothetical or another, what Plantinga calls another logically possible world where instead of sinning, you actually did the right thing. Okay, and because it's a logically possible world, that was a candidate for a world that God could have brought about. Right? So then there's an option for God, in other words, to bring about a world in which you sinned or for the exact same type of choice that bring about a world in which you did not sin.
Yeah,
And
but hold on here, please. Hold on here, because the option God gave it to you. The option is yours now. You have the free will. He gave you the free will. So you chose to sin. It's your option. He gave you this option.
okay, yeah, I'm not contesting that.
Khalas, it's happened. The event already done.
Yeah,
You chose to sin.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I could answer it. I understand what you're saying. But you know what that world would entail? That world where you wouldn't make that sin?
Well,
Because in your worldview, right? That sin you did is because of like a bunch of chain of events that lead you to do this action that you're used to because of how you
I'm talking about libertarian free will.
right, I understand, but do you view free will as that? I mean, do you believe in free will?
I'm a
You,
compatibilist, so I think that I have free will, but not in that sense that I've just illustrated.
are you a determinist?
Yes.
All right, sure. So, but by me taking your view as a determinist, right? All of that is caused by a chain of events that lead you to do that sin in your worldview, correct?
Sure.
Mashallah, I wanted to say the same thing. Jazakallah.
Yeah. So let me go on. Let me follow his what he's saying. So in these chain of events, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, in these chain of events, your influence would be something negative, correct?
My influence would be something what?
Something for you to do that sin, you would have to have learned it from somewhere. You'd have to have tried it some way, or seen it some way, or knew about it some way or another, right?
There's going to
Which
be an
wouldn't.
explanation for why I do that sin rather than a different thing. Sure.
Yeah, obviously that there's an explanation for why you did that and how you knew about that and how you came to know about that for you to act upon it and know it's right or wrong in the first place, right?
Okay.
But all of that is rooted in is dependent on somebody else doing another sin, or you seeing someone doing that sin, or you knowing about it, and all of that is gonna go back to 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 how sin started and what caused the influence, and so what you're entailing is the world that you want is a world without um a test, pretty much, because everything is perfect. There's every you want God to perfect everything, which is not the point. The point is that are the ones making we are the ones that are in control of this reality. We are in control of it. It's not about what God wants it perfect or not, because if God is the one in control of how he wants the reality to be, then we wouldn't have free will. You get what I'm saying?
Well, the point is that I understand what you're saying, but then if you're letting go of God's sovereignty in this way, then it's just not going to be true that God's choices have anything to do with the events in which when we make our own choices. It seems like if God didn't intend to do anything or not create, we would have not made these choices. So there's a dependence. There's a conditional that you are holding to. And whether you understand that deterministically, whether God determines you to choose or whether God brings about there's different language here in philosophy for what it means.
Danny, can you keep it to yourself? Because when you use collectively and you use term God collectively, then we lose focus. We are talking about you were talking about if you decide to steal from a charity or try to contribute to the charity. That's if you do that, then we can continue on that. Because what happened is this: I've decided to go to that charity shop. I've decided to, if the tin on the charity shop was not there in the table, I've decided to pick it up and steal it. The cashier was not looking. There's so many factors playing into the role of me stealing. So if you keep it that simple, we will be able to follow it up.
Okay, yeah. So
If I could,
you go into charity.
do you mind?
Hello?
Because I feel like you missed a couple points on the Islamic paradigm, and I just want to go over them to cement them before we go forward with that example.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah, this is
Okay, thank you. So, I'm gonna read an excerpt here. I
okay.
emailed you where from. Allah is sovereign over the universe, knows all things before they happen, and decrees them into existence with limitless power. At the same time, Allah delegated will to human beings to test their deeds, culminating in the day of judgment. The reality of providence is conveyed to us through the literary images of the pen, preserved tablet, and the records of deeds. Allah decreed all things on the preserved tablet, which in an absolute sense does not change. However, the fulfillment of those decrees can change based upon the actions we take. If Allah decreed an evil fate for us, He may change it if we sincerely supplicate to Him or perform a good deed for His sake. Our God given will, subordinate to the will of Allah, directs the destiny Allah brings into being for us. All people ultimately have two possible destinations decreed in the afterlife, paradise or hellfire, and only one of them will be fulfilled.
All right, thanks for that.
I also want to give a quick example about actualizing a world with these choices or without evil. Let me give you this example, right? Let's actually presuppose God does not exist, right? And the Big Bang happened on its own, blah blah blah, and everything that's going on right now is the same as it is. And all of these events have been gathered inside of a book. It's a book full of the events, every single event that occurred since the Big Bang happened, right? And the world ended, everything, and then there's this magical book or metaphorical book that exists that contains all of these events from start to finish within the universe, right?
Okay.
How does that, right? We having that as a fact that these events will occur no matter what change if we put God and his knowledge in the beginning. It doesn't affect anything because either way, whether God exists with the knowledge of these events occurring, or God does not exist, and these events will still occur either way.
Yeah, I agree
You
with
get
you. I
what I'm
don't think
saying?
there's yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
So you're saying, oh, why wouldn't God actualize a world where you're pretty much saying, oh, let God make a world where He changes our nature, where He changes the way we choose, where He changes pretty much our factory settings, where we don't,
No,
where
but
we
I'm not
don't do
saying that,
evil.
right? That's not entailed by libertarian free will. Because remember, libertarian free will, the idea is that when you make a choice, the only thing that explains that choice rather than a different one, or that choice, I should just say, is you, right? That at the same time, you could have done differently given the same set of prior conditions, including your nature and your antecedent conditions, would the external factors outside of you. And so if you're holding on to that conception of free will, which is what a lot of people that push the free will theodicy, they're holding to that kind of conception of free will, then it's still susceptible to my argument.
I really don't see the issue, bro. But Khalil could continue with you. Maybe he has some objections, but at the end of the day, all I know is that whatever happens here, it happens because of other dependent things that influence us and the way we act upon it, using still our choices. But you have a limited amount of options to do a certain action, right? You could do either A, B, or C, right? For example, and there is different percentages on on the chances whether you're gonna pick this option or that option or that option, right? And depending on how you were influenced in life and everything everything you're gonna choose depending which option and the percentage, right? You get what I'm saying?
Okay.
And but with the knowledge with in our paradigm, if we have the knowledge of what good is and bad is, and no matter how we're influenced, no matter what, Once you know what good is and bad is, and you choose to act upon it, no matter how you're influenced or determined to act, you're choosing to act upon it knowing it is bad, knowing it is evil. It's not taking away from your free will. You're still choosing to do it because of your knowledge.
I'm not so sure what sort of premise that I've said that you're replying to.
I mean, I'm not sure what you're really implying, because you're implying that we don't have free will, or is that
No,
God
no.
could have just made a world
Now remember
that we would.
Muhammad's question was, what do you think about how free will factors into this whole problem of evil discussion? And then I was explaining, how in philosophy, how free will is used as an explanation or as a response to problems of evil.
Would you please continue your example of the charity, stealing the
Yeah.
charity and giving the charity, and help us to understand? Maybe it will help us to understand it better.
Yeah. So the example is to illustrate what libertarian free will is. Okay. So this is the example. You go into a charity, you're deciding whether to give to it or to take from it. Give to it or to steal from it.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
this is, and the first point is that this is morally significant, meaning that if you chose to take from the charity, had you done differently, you would have done the right thing instead of the wrong thing. And conversely, if you chose to give to the charity, if you did differently, you would have been doing the wrong thing. There are some choices we make that, according to people that push this theodicy, where we make decisions, and if we did differently, it would have not been wrong, right? I go into a store, I choose Lucky Charms over Cocoa Puffs. If had I chose differently, it would not have been wrong. So the first thing that we want to establish is that the proponents of the free will theodicy, are saying that we're really only talking about morally significant free will, where when we choose to do the good, if we do something differently than what we chose, we would have been doing something wrong. Okay, that's the first point. The second point is that they accept libertarian free will. So a lot of these people accept that if you chose to do the wrong thing, you could have chosen to do the right thing. So if I go into the charity and take from it, one of the reasons I know that, according to libertarian free will, that I was free in that choice is that I could have given to it rather than taken it. That I could have done the right thing. Okay? So that's and it's not just that I could have done the right thing, is that I could have done it no matter what my prior circumstances are, right? It doesn't matter. That the idea is that nothing determined my choice, in other words. Okay?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
me and me only. Okay, so that's
Yes.
and then the last thing is that, well, I kind of just said it, that so we got morally significant. It has to be morally significant to be free. You needed the principle of alternate possibilities, which is just a fancy way of saying you could have done differently if you did the wrong thing, and if you did the right thing, you could have done the wrong thing. And the third one is that you are the ultimate cause of your actions. There's nothing prior, no nature, no antecedent conditions that sufficiently caused your action, whether that be the right action or the wrong action. Okay, so that is what libertarian free will is in a nutshell, and that's what people are saying when they're offering free will as an explanation or reply to the problem of evil. So are we all together on that?
Could I?
Okay,
ask,
I understand what you said about the free will. Okay, and I will give you an example, and you correct me. For example, if something is not related to moral system, it's like I'm walking on the street, and I decided to look at my right. I could have decided to look at my left, but I looked at my right. This is the same example. Is this example applies to your
It does not, because
definition?
it's not morally significant, right?
Yes, yes. This is what I said. This is what I said. It's not related to moral, but it's a free will. It's a kind of free will, right?
Right. It's a kind of free will, but you see,
Good.
they want to
Good.
say, you're right. They want to say
From
that
here, from
will
this
is-
example, from your example, how do you come to the conclusion that God is not existing?
Oh, okay. Well, I just explained what free will was, right? I thought you were trying to ask me, well, can free will be a reply to your argument, your problem of evil argument, right? I thought that was
No. My initial question was, I don't understand the problem of evil or the free will, how do you conclude from that there is no God?
That's
So
not the
this is my
argument,
problem.
bro. That's not the argument, bro. That's a different argument. That's a problem of evil.
Yeah. But this was my
He's pretty much
question.
saying
This
that.
was my question. This was
pretty
my
much saying-
initial question.
He's pretty much
That
saying the conclusion is pretty much that God is
because
evil, but like in a different way. But Islam still had something to say.
Yeah, it's. I just wanted to understand for you, to explain for me why Adam ate from the tree when he was told not to. How did the free will come into play there?
Ooh.
What decreed that eating?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, well, it depends on your theology, but the point is that if God didn't intend to create Adam and Eve, they would have not made those choices. So there's a conditional there, right? And so if God knows that, then it fits the conditions with responsibility, and also that if there might be some counterfactuals or scenarios, rather, I should say, maybe to make it more easier with the language. There are going to be possibilities where there is no sin, there are no evil choices. So then God could have brought about that world. And that's kind of the point with the free will stuff, is that if you could have done differently, while the antecedent conditions all remain constant, then if God's powerful, you could have brought about that world instead of the world in which you sinned or you ate from the fruit.
But why
you do
did
realize
Adam? Why did Adam? Why was it decreed that Adam? What caused it that he did that? What was it fundamentally where that took place?
According to your view, or
Explain it with your paradigm, because I'm not really getting.
I don't
what
believe
you're
in
saying
Adam.
But if you're saying, well, if God existed in this paradigm and with free will, etc., then go forth with the example of Adam and eating from the tree when he's
Well,
told
am I
not
using
to.
your conception of God? Because
Yes,
okay.
please, because I want to see what you're saying the issue is here with the free will.
Okay. I see what you're asking me now. So if I'm understanding your conception of God, it would go something like this with respect to Adam and sinning: that Adam and Eve had morally significant free will. That when they chose to eat the fruit, that if they did it differently, they would have done the right thing rather than the wrong thing, and they could have done differently, and that the ultimate cause of their actions is themselves and no one else. Okay, but what that implies is that there's another scenario in which Adam and Eve did not sin. Okay, so then the question is, if God knew about that case, then he had the power to bring about that world rather than the world in which Adam and Eve sinned. So then so what would it mean to say that God brought about the world in which Adam and Eve sinned would be quite puzzling, because that means that that would be the world that he preferred to bring about rather than the world in which he did the right thing. And that's kind of like part of the conundrum that I'm raising.
You're saying he preferred a world where evil can take place instead.
Right.
He could have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So in our paradigm, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Allah had written Adam's fate 40 years before his creation.
But that's compatible with libertarian free will on many views.
Do you hold to that?
Do I hold to libertarian free will?
Yeah.
No, I'm a compatibilist, which makes the problem worse for you, by the way. But you don't want to be a compatibilism is just saying God determined everything, or exhaustive divine determinism, creaturely free to will, as Calvinists might say. That's just God, what libertarians might say, forcing you to sin or causing you to sin directly.
It didn't happen
like you're a
because
robot.
it's written.
Yeah, like I mean, look, they're not going to say that, but yeah, that's how it's going to be perceived by the libertarians. So I'm offering you the stronger version of free will that doesn't imply that God caused your actions, but there's still going to be a sense in which, even though God did not cause your actions, he brought about your actions.
I don't know if I could stretch it that far, to be honest.
Khalil, what's your take on this so far?
He's probably asleep. I'm going to go get something to drink. I'll be right back.
Then back to the problem of the world where Allah will to have the world with sins, with evil. What's the problem with this?
He's
Okay,
saying,
Allah will to allow this to happen. What's the problem?
I understand,
Sorry,
but
I'm
he's
sorry.
saying,
I'm back now. I want to get something to drink. What were you saying?
yeah,
I was asking you. Okay, let's agree that Allah will to allow this world of sin, of evil to exist. Okay, he didn't choose the other world, which is everything is perfect. He chose this. What is the problem here?
Yeah, so there's you're drawing the distinction between God allowing something versus directly causing it or something, right?
No, he didn't cause it. He didn't cause it.
He allowed it to happen.
He allowed it.
Yeah,
He gave us the options to select, to choose.
Yeah, I think that
he didn't trick us. He didn't trick us to it.
Yeah, I think that
he put us on the test. So what is the problem here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't, for the kind of God that you're talking about, I don't really know what it means to say that God allows something other than that he indirectly brings it about. So, for instance, you and I go fishing, you fall into the lake and I just watch you drown. I allowed your drowning. And so I didn't cause you to drown, but I've let it happen. But it's still an intentional choice, right? It's a choice on my part that
Okay.
Okay. So
even though,
is that a
okay,
problem?
so what?
Yeah, okay.
Is that a problem?
The problem with God is that he's in control of all the water molecules that are drowning you. I'm not. Right? So okay, so the idea is that this notion of allow is not something that you can use if everything is in control of God's intentionality. Sorry, if God's intentionality is in control of everything. So
everything is in his control, but he allows you to choose, to select, to sin or not.
Yeah, but
I don't see the problem here. I don't see the problem.
No, brother. He's saying God can save you from drowning, and he can do this, and he can do that, but he's choosing not to. It's like you're that one friend that he sees you drowning in the pool, but he's not trying to save you. But here's the thing, bro. You're not working.
No. He said no. Who said this? This is not accurate, actually, because he wanted to save us. He sent us messengers. He sent us the books, the guidance. Yeah.
No, that's not what he was talking about. Like, for a real life example, right? Let's say me and you, we go to the beach, right? And and you're in the beach, and I go inside the ocean, right? And you see me drowning, right?
Yeah.
Would you help me?
Because I told you first, before we go, don't go very deep, right?
I'm going step by step.
I alerted you. I alerted you before. Yeah. We went there in the beach, and I asked you, okay, take care. Please don't go very deep, because you might have some bad things happen to you, right? And I confirmed to you that this is very wrong. Don't do this. So,
and he also told you that I will not help you if you go there.
Yes, because if you
said that,
choose with your free will,
I won't help you. I've told you ahead of time that if you go there, you may suffer some consequences. So don't expect me to pull you out if you do suffer those consequences.
Yeah, because I alerted you already, and with your free will, you chose to go very deep, and this will happen to you. It's your problem. You didn't obey my words. You didn't hear to what I told you. And this is the whole point of free will, because we have this world, by the way, the world what you are talking about, it is there already. We have angels. Angels are the perfect world, where they don't do any mistakes, they don't do any sins, they obey whatever Allah asked them to do. this world is already existing. It is there already. But our world is meant to give us the free will, where you get either punishment or pleasure. So this is the whole point. If you don't have the free will, then we will be like angels, and we are not. Does this make sense?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
No, like I said, it doesn't. I don't think it makes sense to say that God allows for something if He's in control of all the
Yeah,
conditions.
let me respond to that. Because I get your argument. I get your argument. I don't. Yeah. So so what you're saying is that if God exists and He is good and not evil, therefore things that are evil in the world that are taking place should simply go in a way where God just doesn't allow it to happen and changes the scenario, right?
Well, I don't know about. I'm not saying anything about what God should do. The point is that He's if He.
No, you're saying the problem of evil should be solved, will be solved if if God solved this, is what you're saying,
Yeah, that
correct?
God could bring about a world with no evil.
Yeah, that God could pretty much every single from the start, He could have just made Adam not sin. Like he could have like went to
Right.
Adam, be like,
That would
or
be
like went to
miserliness on his
yeah, yeah,
behalf.
yeah, yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna continue because he's gonna fall into a problem. Yeah, he instead of like right before Adam and Eve eat from the apple, right before they take this first bite, he's gonna say, hold on, no, no, don't eat from it. And this is the world you want, pretty much. And the problem is though that from the start, the way it all started is because God told them like, hey, this specific tree right there, don't touch it, right? But any other tree, you're good. But this one, if you touch it, there's some pretty bad consequences that you're gonna suffer, right? And they have everything you can imagine, everything you can desire, everything, bro. But unfortunately, they get influenced. They start to get deceived and feel like they need this tree. They start to get curious, like, why this tree? Why can't I eat from it? You get what I'm saying? And they just wanna know how it feels like to eat from this tree, even though they know the consequences, and they're still acting upon it. And this is why knowledge plays a big part in this. So for you to say that they have knowledge that this is bad, and you still want God to come to them and be like, hey, stop! I already told you this is bad. No, bro, that's not how it works. Because this is where the test starts. You know, when you enter the classroom and the teacher puts a timer on and you start the paper, this is where the test starts. Like, hey, here's the knowledge. Go for it. Start life. You have the knowledge. Don't do this, and you have whatever you want, and then the teacher can't help you in the test after you studied for it, after you have the knowledge. He can't just be like, oh no, don't go eat from the tree. So your example is pretty flawed, and it just makes it
Yeah,
doesn't
I'm
work in
kind
our
of unaware what
paradigm.
you're responding to. What are you responding to?
I'm
Like, what is it that
responding
you?
to and
What's the
I'm responding
disagreement?
to and I'm responding to God making a world where there's no evil in from the first place. So no evil could ever exist from the first place, which entails that when Adam is eating from the apple, God actually stops him from eating the apple.
It doesn't
Therefore, no evil happens.
not if libertarian free will is true.
Listen, bro, I don't know about all of that stuff, but you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no. So what he's saying is, even with the example that was given, that there's still a situation to where that which ought not happen ought also happen. Like even with the example that we're giving, that he allows things to happen that ought not happen, that there's some type of greater good in it. But I would still make the argument that even though these things lead to some type of greater good, there's still things that the greater good could have been achieved um if the events didn't occur. So I wouldn't entail that it ought happen, but also ought not happen.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that one verse in the Quran where the angels are asking Allah, they're like, are you gonna create these creatures that are gonna cause bloodshed and suffering on earth and the planet? And God said, I know which you do not know, which kinda entails, the greater good that we're talking about. But this is simply our choice from the beginning. Like we chose to enter this life and make our choices in this game that we're playing right now. Right? There could be like 5 billion souls that are chilling in the realm of souls that just didn't choose to take the test. But you, speaking to me right now, have chosen to enter this life, partake in this test, right? But now you're gonna have to go back. Oh, well, God didn't have to create us in the first place. Well, now we're just, we're gonna go in a circle. We're gonna say, God created us because He willed it to be. So it's not really an argument then. But yeah.
If I was just to say that any event that ought not happen is an event that is actualized by a creation of God, not God Himself, and that even if it leads to a greater good, that I would still say that that event ought not have happened, because the greater good could have been achieved even if that event did not occur. So then that's where I was. I don't think there's.
Well, then
That's why I think that.
Then it would be gratuitous. Then it'd be evil in the unnecessary sense, right? And so it would just be, all things considered, ought not to have happened, given that it served no purpose, right?
No, how does that logically follow?
Well, if you're saying that that evil event was not doesn't explain the bringing about of some greater good, then you kind of lose out on that theodicy, right? That then
No, it could. It did bring about a greater good, but that doesn't mean that that's how it had to have happened.
Well, then I don't know how you're using explanation then, because the idea is that if you're saying that X explains Y, but then Y could have been brought about by not X.
Well, in possible world theories, you can have multiple possible explanations and then one actualized one.
Yeah, but then if you're saying that X explains Y, but then there's some other possible world where X doesn't bring about Y, then I don't understand what's going to ground the counterfactual or the conditional if X then Y, because there's going to be a world where if no X then Y.
Well, what grounds it would be the will of the one that's directly actualizing the state of affairs that indirectly give access to events that ought not happen.
No, what I'm saying is that if you're saying that it explains that event, then there's a conditional, right? Or rather a counterfactual conditional, where if not X, then not Y. Right? That's what I take an explanation to mean. Otherwise, I don't know what you mean by by if you were to say that, well, X explains Y, but if not X, then we still would have had Y.
I'm not saying we still would have had Y. I'm still saying we could have had Y even without X.
Well, then I just don't know what you mean. Then the explanation X doesn't ground the counterfactual, right? So then I don't know what you mean by explanation at that point. Like, so here's an easy example to kind of get at my point. If I say that let's say I go on a walk and I trip, and you ask me, Danny, why did you trip? I said, well, the rock explains why I tripped. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, then that grounds a counterfactual. In that moment, had there not been a rock, I would have not tripped. But if you're
that's
saying
not true.
Okay, so then I don't know why I would say to you, if it's the case that I would have tripped, even if there were no rock, then I don't know what it means to say that the rock explains.
You could have also tripped if you had untied shoelaces. Doesn't necessarily need to be the rock.
Okay, but the point is that if I'm counting it as an explanation, right? I'm saying that, oh, well, if there had not been a rock there, I would have not tripped. Now, you can say that it was you can, provide a more detailed explanation, right? And then that's going to be a set of certain physical facts that but the point is that that set of physical facts, had there not been that set, right, then you would have not tripped. Otherwise, I just don't know what you mean by explanation at all.
Yeah, I think your example in the argument would have, for it to logically follow the way that I think you're arguing it, would have to necessitate some kind of would need some type of necessitarianism.
No, because explanations do. There is a necessity operator on explanations, but it's prior to the conditional, right? So, in other words, the way that explanations work is that you have the necessity operator before the if, right? So necessarily, if the rock had been there and along with all the other set of antecedent conditions, then I would have tripped. But it's not going to follow that. Therefore, necessarily, I'm going to trip, or necessarily there's a rock. The idea is that explanations govern. There's a better term for this. Not overarch, but there's the they cover the whole conditional. There's a fancier word for that, but the necessity operator, with respect to conditionals, that where the antecedent is the explanans and then the explanandum is the consequent, the necessity operator is prior to the conditional.
Yeah, that was a lot to take in. What was the point of what you were saying?
Yeah, the point is that what an explanation is, there is necessity. You were saying that, well, if there's necessity involved, then you're committed to necessitarianism, which is just a synonym.
Well,
for
no, if you're no, what I'm saying is that we have to bring in possible world semantics into it, so there could be multiple possible explanations for why you tripped.
Sure, but then that would just be changing the antecedent. The antecedent where, given those physical conditions that include the rock, then I would have tripped. Yeah, there are worlds in which those antecedent conditions weren't in place, and I didn't trip. But the point is that I don't know what it would mean to say those set of physical facts explain my tripping, but you could that at the same time you could have those exactly the same physical facts, but you would have not tripped. Then I really don't know what you mean by explanation at all.
Explanation is just a dependency relation between cause and effect.
Yeah, but those ground counterfactuals.
How are you defining counterfactual?
Well, it's in the actual world. I tripped over a rock. A counterfact to that is, had I not tripped, it's not true that I didn't trip. So had I not, it's a conditional where there's there's a counter to the fact, counter to the actual world, right? So
yeah, okay. I was just making sure that we were on the same page.
Yeah. So the point
but the counterfactual to tripping, you would say, is not tripping, right?
No. Counterfactual conditionals, right? So you're going to have an antecedent and a consequence if then.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's going to go something like this, right? You ask me, why did you trip? And I say, well, there's the rock caused me to trip, or it explains why I tripped. And what that's going to mean, in a more rigorous way to put it, is there was a certain set of physical facts, which included a rock, okay, that were in place that caused my tripping. So given those physical facts, then I trip. But then that grounds the counterfactual, where if those physical facts were any different, then I would have not tripped.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And so yes, but then you're also saying that given the exact same physical facts in some other possible world, I don't trip. And at that point, the explanation no longer grounds the counterfactual or the conditional.
Well, but no, but I didn't say under the same physical facts.
Okay, so then that's fine then, right? Then we're in agreement. What it means to say that the rock, or when I say that the rock caused my tripping, is that there's some set of physical facts that explain my tripping, which grounds the counterfactual. Had there not been those physical facts in place, I would have not tripped, which means that there is no the necessity operator is going to be before that. So that implies that that if those physical facts that it wouldn't make sense anymore to say that given those exact same physical facts that I didn't trip. That's what I'm pointing now.
I think the proper counterfactual would be that in one scenario you have the rock causing you to trip. The counterfactual to that would be that if there wasn't a rock there, then the rock wouldn't have caused you to trip.
Yes,
doesn't necessitate that you wouldn't have tripped.
Well, given those physical facts, yeah.
Okay. So then there's that now we have multiple scenarios to where you could have tripped and it's still something that ought not happen.
Sorry, what?
So if you're saying that it's possible with possible world semantics that there's another cause that could have been there, that another physical fact of the state of affairs that could have caused you to trip, then you end up falling into this category to where there's multiple states of affairs that ought not happen, and then there's the counterfactuals to those to where you would say that they ought happen. But I'm just simply saying, instead of saying if the rock that wasn't there, I wouldn't have tripped, I think that's different. I think the direct dichotomy of the rock causing you to trip is the rock not causing you to trip.
Okay, so maybe we can rewind. What is it that you're contesting exactly?
I'm contesting the idea that if the rock wasn't there, then you wouldn't have
So
tripped.
prior to that, that was just an example to understand what I mean by explanation. So I don't know what you were contesting, such that I had to explain what I meant by explanation.
Well, I think the issue that I had before was just simply about possible worlds.
Okay, so let's take. Okay, what was the contention then?
The what?
The contention. What did you object to?
Oh no, so I don't think I was objecting to anything. I was just trying to further understand how you were making your argument.
Oh, okay.
So if you're saying that there are things that ought happen, or if I'm saying that there's things that ought not happen, right? You would say that, okay, because of the greater good, that those things then ought happen. And I'm simply saying no, these things, regardless of if they point out to, conclude to have some greater good, that I would still say that those things ought not happen, because those things could have the greater good could have been derived in multiple other ways.
Yeah,
So
but you
it's not
see, if
just
you're
one
saying
event.
that in the actual world, that evil event brought about a greater good, you're invoking a sense of explanation there. And so it's going to ground the counterfactual, given the rock example, where had that evil event not occurred, the greater good would have not been achieved.
Yeah, but that's where the problem is. That's what I'm saying. The problem is that the dichotomy you're bringing up is, if X causes event to occur, that ought not happen, and then the dichotomy to that is that X did not cause that to occur.
But you're saying, look, the way I understood you is saying, well, on one hand, this evil event brought about the greater good, but on the other hand, it didn't have to bring it about. That means that there was there could have been some other means of bringing that about.
Uh-huh.
All right. But that's still going to be true, that if it's the case that in this scenario where if you had that evil event, then that would bring about a greater good. So if you had, in those same circumstances, if you did not have that evil event, then the greater good would not have been achieved.
If you did not have the event, then the greater good would have never been achieved?
Right.
No, I'm saying if the event didn't occur, that the greater good still would have been achieved.
Yeah, but then you're just, then I don't know what it would mean to say that that evil event brought about a greater good, because that's an explanatory relation.
Well, I'm not saying, but that's where it goes back to the whole necessity thing.
I don't look. So if we go back to the rock example, it's true that the rock caused me to trip. It's true that there might have been other worlds in which my shoelaces were untied and I tripped, but that's not the case, right? The case is that what sufficiently explains my tripping is the rock. Okay, and so to say that, well, like that's an explanation, but at the same time, given that same exact set of antecedent conditions, you didn't trip. That's where I start to lose you, right? So if we say that, okay, well, that evil event occurred, it brought about that greater good, but at the same time, given those exact same evil event, that exact same evil event, and set of facts that constitute that evil event, that the greater good might have not have been achieved, or vice versa, then I don't see in what sense you would be saying that the evil event did in fact bring about a greater good.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I don't know if it's because I've been streaming for 11 hours or I'm not understanding, because it seems like we agree and then we end up disagreeing with an example.
Well, maybe I can just ask you questions so that you don't have to try to digest everything I'm saying. Do you think that there are any cases where evil events bring about the greater good?
Where evil events bring about the greater good?
Yes.
Directly or indirectly?
Well, either. That in other
I would
words,
definitely say indirectly, sure.
okay, now that's an explanatory relation, right? Where that you believe that there's some evil events that explain an outcome of the greater good, whether it be directly or indirectly, doesn't matter. Is that correct?
What was the question?
Yeah. Do you believe that there are evil events that occur, and that whether directly or indirectly explain a greater good outcome?
I would say indirectly, yes.
Explained or caused.
It doesn't
Explained
matter
or
whether it's
caused.
indirectly. Doesn't matter whether it's directly or indirectly. The point is that there's still going to be it's going to be explanatory. There's going to be an explanatory relation.
Sure, yeah, but I think that indirectness is when I say indirectly, that's important.
I don't see how.
Well, it may not be important as of right now, but further into the questions,
Okay, that's
it
fine.
may play
Whether
an
you say
important part.
indirectly or directly, that's okay. The point is that you're assenting to the fact that
Giving explanation. Yeah, we can agree that there's
evil
explanation.
events, right? So now they're going to be particular events that bring about particular good, greater good outcomes. So we can look at those. Okay. Do you think that given those evil events, right, that the greater good could have not been achieved?
In those events that the greater good could have not been achieved.
So the question is, do you think that there are cases in which those events, these evil events, occurred, but in fact the greater good was not achieved?
Yes.
Okay. So that means that you have two conditionals here, right? You have a conditional where given the evil event, then greater good, and then you also have the conditional given the evil event, these greater good did not occur. It seems like you have indeterminacy there, which means that you're not licensed. If there's indeterminacy, there's not going to be an explanation with respect to those evil events to those greater good outcomes.
Well, this is why I said this is why I said indirectly.
And directly, still gonna. What I said is still true.
How?
Well, you just said that on one hand, it's explanatory, which means that there's going to be some conditional if those evil events, then greater good. Is that right?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that in any event that something that ought not happen will always derive a greater good.
Okay,
it's
that's
not
fine.
always the case.
You still hold to the conditional that if evil event, then greater good outcome, right? Because it's explanatory on one hand, right? But then you're also saying that there are cases where there's a possible world where, given those exact same evil events, but the greater good outcome does not become actual, doesn't come into fruition, which means that now you believe in two conditionals, right? The conditional where if given those evil events, then a greater good outcome, and also the conditional if those evil events, then not those greater good outcomes would not occur, which means that there's indeterminacy, right?
Sure, and I don't necessarily have a problem with the indeterminacy.
But
I mean,
indeterminacy undermines explanation.
Not necessarily. What do you mean it undermines explanation?
Well,
yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. I get that. So yeah, what's the explanation to someone making a choice? I mean, within substance dualism.
Well, that's immaterial. The point is that you've contradicted yourself when you say that these evil events explain these greater good outcomes, but also that given that the truth of both conditionals, where given the evil events, greater good outcome occurs, also given the evil events, greater good outcomes do not occur. If you also hold to that, then there's indeterminacy, which means there's a lack of explanation. So then that implies the belief that it's explained and not explained, given these events, and that's just contradictory.
What I don't see the contradiction. Can you describe it again? Because
remember in the beginning you affirmed an explanatory relation between these evil events and greater good, right? Okay, so now you believe that these events are explanatorily relevant to these greater good outcomes. So that's my P. Now I'm going to get you the not P. Okay. At the same time, you believe that you could have those exact same evil events, but the greater good outcome does not occur, which means that there's going to be another conditional. If in that world, if there are those evil events, then those greater good outcomes do not occur. Now, if you compare these two conditionals, the conditional I just gave and the conditional by which you affirmed explanation, you're going to get indeterminacy. And that indeterminacy implies lack of explanation. And so then now you're left with a not P. So it's both explained and not explained.
Okay,
so can we agree here, Khalil? Can we agree here that about the fact that evil events don't imply an explanation for always, don't always imply an explanation for a greater good? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Are we on the same page here?
Well, yeah, but that's not the problem that I'm seeing. Is that I think what Danny's doing is trying to tie down to non-immaterial causes, right?
No,
so
nothing I said had to do with material immateriality. The point is that you believe.
Well, but when I gave the idea of, okay, someone can have a will and that makes a choice, and that's why I don't have a problem with indeterminacy, you said, but that's talking about the immaterial.
No, I never said that. I said that if it's indeterminacy, look, what am I saying in terms of what's being indeterminate? I'm not talking about actions, right? I'm just saying these events could involve actions.
We're talking about explanations, and I would say that the will of some being who has the ability to choose between options, that will is an indeterminate explanation for why some event X happened.
Yeah, I'm not contesting that. What I'm trying to point out to you is that you can't think that it's explained, because that's going to imply the conditional where if X then Y, but then also think that, well, if X and the exact same set of facts that constitute X, then also not Y, because then you're going to have two conditionals. If X then Y, and also if not X then Y, or rather, sorry, if X then not Y, then that implies indeterminacy, right? And indeterminacy, it undermines your belief that it's explained.
I believe that it goes back to a certain point to where there's indeterminacy.
Look, do you believe that it's explained? If you do, then you hold to the conditional if X, then Y.
If well, yeah. So within a physical nature, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then, in any sense, do you think that it's explained? And if you think it doesn't matter whether material, immateriality, materiality, it doesn't matter, right? Do you think that there are any events in which are events that bring about the greater good, but nonetheless are evil?
Yeah, there are some evil events that can bring about the greater good. Yeah.
No, that's not my question. My question is not whether they can possibly bring about it, is whether they do in fact bring about greater good.
Yeah, I can't answer that question because
you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, given any example, even if an example was given, there's still a possibility that's not necessarily the case.
All right, then the theodicy goes out the window, because the theodicy is that these evil events, well, they have an explanation for why they occur, that they bring about greater good outcomes. But if you don't know whether they bring about greater good outcomes, then you're just not using that theodicy.
Well, that it just means that I don't have information of what the explanation is. But
Exactly.
that's exactly
So
what
you're
the
not.
Quran teaches.
Theodicies are by nature explanatory. They seek to explain evil.
No, but who said that evil events always imply greater good?
I'm saying all I need for my argument is that there are some, but he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know whether there's some evil
No,
events.
he said already some. Yeah, this is what I
Khalil, do you
said.
think that some?
Let's agree that some events, some evil events, will imply a greater good and some not.
Do you believe
Are
that,
we okay
Khalil?
with this?
Do you believe that, Khalil?
Believe what?
That there are some events that are evil that bring about a greater outcome?
That there are some that it can. I'm not. I can't say that it does.
He doesn't know, Muhammad.
See, we have in Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal says, وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم. عسى here means maybe. So maybe means it's not always that things that we hate is good. It's not always the case. It's maybe. Okay? So yes, sometimes evil things not necessarily imply a greater good.
It's in the same case when I'm speaking with an atheist about.
Let's take a simple example. Okay, someone stole money from someone else. Okay, and he stole this money. What greater good might come from this? What is the possibility? I mean, and nothing good happened after this. So what? An evil event occurred. Khalas, no greater good out of it. Fine, that's it.
Are you talking to
me? So we have some evil events. Both of you, some evil events will cause a greater good. Some evil events will not cause a greater good. Fine, that's fine. We can have both in reality.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not contesting that, but I think that what I'm just saying is that do you believe that there is a case where some evil event does in fact bring about a greater good? Khalil said he didn't know.
Yeah, because I'm not the one actualizing the universe, so I wouldn't necessarily need the explanation.
Yeah, so he's just not using that theodicy, Muhammad.
Okay, fine. I'm just talking from my understanding. I'm not a very philosophical, technical expert like you guys. I'm just talking about my.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way to get out of the contradiction, because I see what the contradiction that Danny is bringing up is. I see where the contradiction lies, but I'm giving a resolution to the contradiction, which would mean that you would not be able to necessarily say that theodicy works in all
You're
cases.
saying that I don't know if there may not be any cases where evil brings about a greater good, and so that would circumvent, or that would overcome my argument. I think my argument is only going to be powerful to those that think that, well, there's in fact some cases where evil brings about a greater good, but also that you can have the exact same set of conditions but not have that greater good.
With the same event?
Sorry, what was that, Muhammad?
No, I mean the same event, you mean?
Yeah, the exact same event. Yeah.
In different conditions?
No, then that would be a different event.
Give me an example,
objective to the overall view after the event also, no?
Sorry, what was that?
So after the event takes place, to assimilate whether it did reach a greater good would have a time factor also. So immediately you may not see the greater good in it.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with. Yeah, I don't mean to suggest that these events are immediate to each other.
It's kind of like when speaking to a determinist about quantum indeterminacy. Like the answer that I usually get is just, with the problem of quantum indeterminacy is that there seems to be some type of explanation, right? But we don't know what it is.
Yeah, I see why you would bring that up. Anyways, guys, it's been, I bet we're all exhausted, right? Maybe we're not, but I am.
I can appreciate being a moral vandal is quite tiring. I completely resonate and appreciate.
It's true.
Your
All right,
feelings.
y'all take care,
Yeah,
guys. I gotta go.
Yeah, you too, Danny.
Bye.
Good talking, bro.
Yeah, that was an interesting route that he went down, because normally it goes down the horn of like the Euthyphro dilemma, to where does God do things because they are good, or does anything that God does is it good just by nature of him being good? Does is this goodness like some type of floating attribute, or is it intrinsic? Intrinsic to God. That's normally what people use.